Skyrim is a land defined by diversity. From the frosted peaks of the Pale to the golden marshes of the Rift, every race of Tamriel finds some foothold in this frozen north. Nords call it home, Imperials claim its roads, Dunmer fill its grey quarters, Khajiit roam its borders, and Argonians labour in its shadows. It is, in many ways, a microcosm of the Empire's reach, a melting pot of peoples drawn together by war, trade, and prophecy. Yet, amid all that life and struggle, there is a peculiar absence. For all of its cities, caves, ruins, and villages, there is one race that simply doesn't exist anymore in Skyrim. A race once so powerful that their disappearance reshaped the continent, and whose echoes still hum beneath the mountains. No other race in Tamriel has vanished so completely. Their cities remain, their machines still stir, and yet not one living soul of their kind walks the earth. Skyrim remembers them not as ancestors, but as ghosts of metal and stone. The Dwemer were not like the Nords or the Dunmer. They were not warriors or mystiques, not farmers or priests. They were engineers, philosophers, and atheists. People whose god was reason itself. They called themselves Dwemer, meaning people of the deep. To the Nords, they were the Deep Elves, an ancient branch of the elven races who sought not divine favour, but divine understanding. Their cities tunnelled into the roots of Skyrim's mountains, vast labyrinths powered by magma and mystery. While other races built in wood and stone, the Dwemer built in brass and steam. Their ruins are filled with whirring machines, pressure valves, and ancient gears that still turn after thousands of years. These mechanical sentients, dwarven automatons, guard the secrets of their makers, long after the makers themselves turn to dust. The irony of the Dwemer's absence is that they are everywhere. Their architecture defines Skyrim's underworld. Their machines patrol its ruins. You can almost feel their presence in every hiss of steam, every echoing clang of metal deep below the earth. And yet, not one of them remains alive to claim it. The Dwemer's disappearance is one of the greatest mysteries not only of Skyrim, but of all Nirn. At the height of their power during the First Era, they were the most advanced civilization in existence. Their cities glowed with light, their knowledge rivaled that of gods, and their understanding of tonal architecture, the use of sound and vibration to shape reality, was unmatched. But in a single unrecorded moment, they vanished. Not killed, not conquered or erased. They were just gone. Every Dwemer across all of Tamriel gone in an instant. The cause of their disappearance centres on one thing: their chief tonal architect, and his work with the heart of Lorcan, the divine organ torn from the god who created the mortal world. He believed he could use the heart to transcend morality itself, to give his people eternal existence without the burden of divine subservience. The result was probably annihilation. In one fatal experiment beneath Red Mountain, the Dwemer simply ceased to exist. Their bodies did not decay, their souls did not ascend. They left no corpses, only armour lying empty on the ground. Only one being survived, Yargrim, a Dwemer engineer who was absent in another realm during the disappearance. When he returned, he found himself utterly alone, the last of his kind. His body began to rot, his mind to falter, and his name became synonymous with extinction. When the Dwemer vanished, the world didn't cheer, it shuddered. Their disappearance left entire economies and ecosystems in chaos. The Nords lost their trading partners. Even the Daedra, it said, took note of the silence. Skyrim's mountains became graveyards. Miners who stumbled upon Dwemer ruins whispered of noises that shouldn't be there. Machines still moving, chambers that breathe, and lights that flickered in rooms that should have been dead. The Dwemer were gone, but their world refused to stop functioning. Perhaps that's what makes their absence so chilling. Death in Skyrim is common. You can meet ghosts, Draga, or necromancers who cheat it daily. But the Dwemer didn't die. They simply stopped existing, leaving behind a world that continues to function as though waiting for their return. Every gear that turns in their ruins is a heartbeat with no body. Every glowing crystal is a memory with no mind. If the Dwemer are gone, why do their creations still walk? The dwarven automatons are the last moving fragments of a vanished civilization. These machines defend the ruins tirelessly, programmed to attack anything that disturbs their halls. Some scholars believe the automatons are powered by magical cores or soul gems, but others whisper that the Dwemer themselves became these machines. That Cagrene's great experiment didn't destroy them, it transformed them. This theory suggests that the Dwemer didn't die. They exist within these machines, their consciousness distributed through the humming veins of their cities. Every centurion is a fragment of a collected soul, a mechanical echo of godless people. It's an idea both beautiful and terrifying, a race that sought immortality and found it in metal and fire, condemned to wander their halls forever as hollow echoes of their former selves. When the Dragonborn descends into a Dwemer ruin, it's not just exploration, it's intrusion. You're walking through a graveyard that still breathes. The Dwemer's faith, or lack thereof, was their defining trait. They rejected gods, Daedra and Aedra alike, believing that divinity was an illusion born of mortal ignorance. To them, the gods were not omnipotent beings, but powerful entities bound by the same rules of reality as mortals. Through study and reason, they believed these mortals could ascend to the same level or surpass it entirely. It was this ambition that led Cagrene to the heart of Lorcan. The Dwemer wanted not to serve the divine, but to become divine on their own terms. Their philosophy was cold, precise, and merciless. Where the Nords had myth and mead, the Dwemer had logic and mathematics. Their temples were not houses of worship, but laboratories. Their priests were not prophets, but scientists. It's a vision of the world utterly devoid of comfort. No gods, no afterlife, only the endless pursuit of knowledge. Perhaps in their arrogance they found what they sought, a form of transcendence beyond mortal comprehension. Or perhaps they simply made themselves nothing at all. So why call the Dwemer the race that doesn't exist? Because they are both gone and present. Their absence is visible, their influence is tangible. They are the ghosts of progress, haunting Skyrim's mountains with the hum of their forgotten machines. Every adventurer who delves into a Dwemer ruin feels it, the sense that something is watching, measuring, and calculating. The ruins feel alive because in some strange way, they are. No other race in Skyrim evokes that same paradox. The Nords dominate its surface, the Dunmer thrive in exile, the Argonians endure in bondage. But only the Dwemer exist as both memory and mechanism. They are proof that power leaves traces long after life is gone. In the end, the Dwemer's absence is not a tragedy, it's a warning. Their cities still hum, their constructions still kill, their brilliance still blinds. But no laughter echoes through those halls, no warmth glows from their forges. The Dwemer proved that gods can be denied, but they also proved that in doing so, one risks becoming less than mortal. They sought eternity and found oblivion. And in Skyrim, where every race struggles to survive the cold, perhaps the greatest miracle is not immortality, but simply still being here. Because beneath the snow and stone, the Dwemer wait, not as ghosts, but as a memory the world refuses to let die. The only race that doesn't exist in all of Skyrim, because they were too clever to live. Followers are the lifeblood of Skyrim's world. They make the frozen wilderness feel less lonely, lend a blade in battle, and remind the Dragonborn that even heroes need allies. From Lydia's stoic loyalty to Serana's tragic charm, Followers in the Elder Scrolls Skyrim are more than simple companions. They're pieces of narrative identity scattered across the land. Yet, not all followers share in that attention. Some are adored by players, immortalized in memes, stories, and mods. Others, however, fade into obscurity, forgotten not because they lack worth, but because the game itself hides them away, burying their stories beneath the noise of dragons and destiny. Among these unsung names stands one of Skyrim's most tragic and overlooked characters, Rogi Knotbeard, the Nord miner of Kynes Grove. He is a man defined by humility, loyalty, and quiet endurance. And for that very reason, almost no one remembers him. To find Rogi Knotbeard, one must first find Kynes Grove, a small mining village just south of Windhelm, tucked between jagged cliffs and thick pine woods. It's the kind of place most players pass through once, perhaps on their way to fight the dragon during the Way of the Voice. The dragon's resurrection overshadows everything, even the people who live there. Rogi can be found in the Braidwood Inn, usually drinking or sharing stories with the locals. He's a miner by trade, though his family's history runs deep with adventure and pride. He tells the player that his ancestors were warriors and explorers, and that his family heirloom, a treasured ancestral shield, has been lost to time. That simple backstory becomes his defining feature, his personal quest. Rogi's ancestral shield sends a player to recover it from one of several possible Radiant dungeons. It's a small, unassuming favour, a far cry from the epic battles or Daedric bargains that define other quests. But that's the tragedy of Rogi Knotbeard. His story is simple, human, and entirely overshadowed. Skyrim's world doesn't pause for men like him. Unlike Serana, Farkas, or Ayla, Rogi has no scripted battles, no grand introduction, and no unique combat dialogue. He doesn't tie into a faction or carry mortal weight. When his quest is complete, he becomes available as a follower, but few players even realise it. Part of the reason lies in his placement. Kynes Grove is small, with no quests leading the player to speak with its residents beyond brief encounters. Rogi himself is never essential to any main questline, unless you explore and talk to him by chance. You'll likely never even know he exists. And even if you do recruit him, his combat abilities are modest. He is a warrior, yes, but one of middling skill, without special perks or remarkable dialogue. In a world filled with vampires, mercenaries, and werewolves, a simple miner fades quickly into the background. But what makes Rogi truly forgotten isn't his statistics, it's his humanity. Skyrim's world celebrates grand heroics and dark magic. It rarely celebrates the ordinary man who wakes up, works, and drinks to forget how small his life has become. Rogi Knotbeard embodies that ordinariness so perfectly that he vanishes into it. Kynes Grove itself, it is a settlement that exists in the margins. Not quite a village, not quite a ruin. Its people are miners eking out a living beneath the shadow of dragon-haunted mountains. Rogi represents the working class of Skyrim, the ones who dig, build, and survive while heroes chase prophecy. He is a reflection of the lives the Dragonborn passes without noticing. When you speak to him, there's a warmth in his tone, a rough honesty that contrasts sharply with the arrogance of nobles or mercenaries. He doesn't want power, he doesn't seek vengeance. All he wants is to reclaim his family's honour, symbolised in a shield lost long ago. That quest, modest as it seems, says everything about him. He doesn't dream of slaying dragons or ruling kingdoms. He dreams of remembering who his people were, and in doing so, he exposes one of Skyrim's quietest truths, that history forgets those who never sought to shape it. The tragedy of him isn't just narrative, it's mechanical. Skyrim's design ensures his obscurity. He has no unique voice actor. His quest lacks journal depth or branching choices. His follower mechanics are identical to countless others. He doesn't tie into Radiant events, doesn't attend gatherings, and doesn't appear in factional politics. And yet, The lack of distinction is the point. Rogi represents the countless Nords, miners, farmers and soldiers who populate Skyrim's world but never make its history books. He is the statistical average given form. That's why most players never recruit him, not because he is unworthy, but because the game itself whispers that he isn't important. And in that silence, the player learns something profound about Skyrim's world. Importance is not the same as worth. Rogi's Ancestral Shield quest, though simple, is surprisingly vast when examined closely. He asks the Dragonborn to retrieve a piece of his family's past, lost in some forgotten dungeon. There's something deeply symbolic about this quest. A man buried in obscurity sends the player into another forgotten place to recover a relic of a forgotten line. Every step of that journey is an act of remembrance, one that only the player can complete. And yet, once the shield is recovered, the quest ends quietly. Rogi thanks you, offers his friendship, and if asked, will follow you into battle. There are no fanfares, no grand rewards, no future dialogue about his restored pride. It's hauntingly human in its smallness. In a world where every quest seems to serve destiny, this one serves only memory. And that, paradoxically, is what makes it unforgettable, even as most forget it exists. To understand Rogi's obscurity, one must contrast him with Skyrim's more famous followers. Lydia, the housecarl of Whiterun, becomes iconic because she's scripted into the main quest. Serana from the Dawnguard DLC offers complex backstories and moral tension. Cicero, the mad jester, combines humour and darkness. Rogi, however, offers no drama. He is not a symbol of tragedy or power, merely of persistence. His strength lies not in magic or madness, but in work. In many ways, he is the anti-Serana. Where she is ancient and cursed, he is mortal and ordinary. Where she struggles with immortality, he struggles with legacy. Where others seek redemption or revenge, Rogi seeks recognition. It is precisely because he lacks spectacle that he is forgotten. And yet, that's what makes him seem uniquely real. This obscurity mirrors the social hierarchy of Skyrim itself. The Nords worship warriors and despise weakness. They remember heroes, not miners. They sing songs of his grandma, not of those who dug the stone his fortress was built on. Kynes Grove's miners live under this shadow of cultural neglect. They risk their lives daily, but they are seen as expendable, the silent backbone of the province's wealth and infrastructure. Rogi's lost shield becomes more than a personal heirloom. It's a symbol of the working class forgotten by history. His ancestors were warriors, but now he toils underground. His family's glory has been reduced to labour. His story, like his village, is buried. In that sense, his obscurity is not accidental, it's thematic. Rogi Knotbeard is the embodiment of Skyrim's forgotten backbone. When all is said and done, Rogi Knotbeard stands as the clearest example of one of the most forgotten and neglected followers in all of Skyrim, not because he is poorly written or designed, but because he represents something profoundly human, the inevitability of being overlooked. His life continues whether you notice him or not. His quest can be ignored forever, and his story will never change. He doesn't shape the world, but the world shapes him, and in doing so reveals how fragile identity can be in a land built on legend. Rogi Knotbeard is a mirror held up to the player. He asks nothing of you but remembrance. And in a world defined by power, that is a request far too humble for most heroes to hear. When the wind howls through Kynes Grove and the Dragonborn rides past without stopping, Rogi Knotbeard remains, a flickering candle in a frozen world. He doesn't know he's been forgotten. He keeps drinking, working, and telling stories of ancestors no one else remembers. And maybe that's why he lingers in the hearts of those few who do notice him. Because in the end, the measure of a person isn't fame or strength or glory. It's whether their story still matters to someone, even one traveller passing through the snow. His tale is small, but it's real. And in that quiet, human truth lies the essence of Skyrim itself. He may be one of the most forgotten followers in Skyrim, but for those who remember him, he becomes something far greater, a reminder that even the smallest lives leave echoes in the cold. Skyrim is a land that constantly puts itself on display. Cities rise out of the landscape, ruins tower over the horizon. Even its secrets often feel like they want to be found. But not every place is like this. Some locations don't just hide from the player, they feel hidden from the world itself. Tucked away in mountain ridges no one climbs, buried beneath ruins that no one visits, or quietly existing in places where realistically no one should even know they're there. These aren't just hard to find locations. They're places that feel forgotten, cut off from trade, from travel, from history itself. Places that don't show up in conversation, don't appear in quests, and don't seem to belong to anyone at all. And that's what makes them so interesting. Because when a place is hidden from the world, not just the player, it stops feeling like part of Skyrim's story and starts feeling like something that was never meant to be found at all. Reachwind Eyrie is one of the few places in Skyrim that feels truly hidden, not just because of where it is, but because of how completely disconnected it is from everything around it. As if it exists outside the awareness of the world itself. Located high in the mountains southeast of Markarth, reaching it is less about following a path and more about deliberately going out of your way to find something that the game never really asks you to look for. The Reach is already a region defined by harsh terrain and vertical design, with cliffs and winding paths that make exploration feel uneven and often incomplete. But Reachwind sits above even that, tucked away in a position that feels intentionally removed. There are no nearby settlements guiding you toward it, no meaningful foot traffic, and no sense that anyone in Skyrim even acknowledges its existence. And when you finally arrive, what you're met with isn't exactly activity or danger, but stillness. A quiet, elevated Dwemer structure standing alone against the sky, with no inhabitants, no defences, and no clear purpose remaining. That absence is what defines it, because unlike most Dwemer locations in Skyrim, which are dense, mechanical, and filled with automatons or Falmer, Reachwind feels stripped down to almost nothing. It lacks the usual complexity associated with these ruins. There are no sprawling underground corridors, no functioning systems, no sense that it's still operated in any capacity. It's just the structure itself, a platform, a tower, a fragment of something that once had meaning, now left behind with no context to support it. And that creates a very different kind of presence. Most Dwemer ruins feel like remnants of a lost civilization that you can still interact with. Places where the past is still active in some form. Reachwind doesn't have that quality. It feels inert, complete in its stillness, as if whatever role it once played has been entirely erased, leaving behind only the physical shape of its existence. The fact that it's positioned so high above the surrounding landscape only reinforces that feeling. From the top, you can see across the Reach, the jagged terrain stretching out in every direction, distant landmarks barely visible through the haze. It gives the impression that this place was meant to observe rather than participate, to exist above the world rather than within it. And yet there's no indication of what it was observing, or why it needed to be here at all. That lack of explanation is what makes it feel truly hidden and isolated. Not in the sense that it's difficult to find, but in the sense that it's been removed from the narrative entirely. The game doesn't reference it, no quests lead you there, no characters mention it to my knowledge. It doesn't tie into the broader story of the Dwemer in any meaningful way. It's just there. And because of that, it starts to feel less like a designed location and more like a leftover piece of the world. Something that exists without needing to justify itself. That kind of design is rare in Skyrim, where most locations serve a clear purpose, whether it's for gameplay, storytelling, or exploration. Reachwind resists that structure. It doesn't reward you in any significant way for finding it. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't even try to hold your attention for very long. You arrive, you take in the view, you recognize the isolation of the space, and then there's nothing else to do. And that nothing is exactly what makes it memorable, because it creates a moment where the player is forced to confront the idea that not every place in Skyrim exists for them. Some places exist independently, without quests, without rewards, without any acknowledgement at all. And that independence makes Reachwind feel like it's hidden in a deeper sense. Not just physically, but conceptually. It's hidden from the systems that define the rest of the game. Hidden from the flow of progression, from the structure of quests, from the idea that everything should lead somewhere or mean something. It simply exists high above the world, untouched and unbothered. There's also something distinctly Dwemer about that kind of detachment. The Dwemer are known for their mystery, for their sudden disappearance, and their advanced, often incomprehensible technology. But most of their ruins still feel grounded in function. You can see what they built, how it might have worked, what purpose it might have served. Reachwind doesn't offer that clarity. It feels more abstract, more like a fragment of an idea than a fully realised structure. And because of that, it leans into the more unknowable aspects of Dwemer design. It becomes less about understanding and more about presence. Deepwood Redoubt is one of those locations in Skyrim that doesn't immediately present itself as hidden. But the deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that what you've found isn't just a location off the beaten path. It's something deliberately tucked away from the rest of the world. On the surface, it appears to be just another Forsworn-controlled ruin in the Reach, positioned west of Solitude, surrounded by the region's familiar cliffs and winding paths. You can see parts of it from a distance, stone structures rising out of the landscape in a way that feels consistent with other locations in the area. But that initial visibility is misleading, because Deepwood Redoubt isn't defined by what you can see, it's defined by what it leads to. Once you push past the outer layers, past the expected resistance and into the interior spaces, the location begins to shift. It stops feeling like a simple camp or ruin and starts to feel like a passage, something guiding you further away from Skyrim's surface and into a space that feels almost completely removed from it. This transition is what makes it so effective. Many locations in Skyrim are self-contained. You enter, you clear them, and you leave. Deepwood Redoubt doesn't work like that. It pulls you inward, gradually separating you from the open world until you emerge somewhere entirely different, Deepwood Vale. And that's where the real sense of hiddenness begins. Deepwood Vale doesn't feel like it belongs to the same world you were just in. It's enclosed, quiet, and strangely untouched, surrounded by towering cliffs that cut it off from the rest of the map. There are no roads leading to it, no natural paths that would suggest easy access. The only real way in is through Deepwood Redoubt itself, which immediately reframes the entire experience. What seemed like a standard location becomes a kind of gate, a controlled entry point into something far more isolated. And because of that, the Vale feels less like a place you discovered and more like a place you weren't meant to reach at all. The Forsworn presence here adds another layer to that feeling. Unlike more scattered camps, this space feels intentional, almost curated. It's not just a group of outcasts surviving in the wilderness. It feels like a chosen location, somewhere specifically selected because of how hidden and defensible it is. The surrounding cliffs act as natural walls. Their limited access points make it easy to control, and the overall layout gives the impression of a place that exists outside the influence of Skyrim's border conflicts. While the Forsworn are typically portrayed as aggressive and chaotic, here they feel more settled, more rooted. Like they've found a space where they can exist without interference. And that changes how the location is perceived. It's not just hidden geographically, It's hidden socially and politically as well. It's a place where a group has effectively removed itself from the rest of the province, carving out a pocket of isolation that operates on its own terms. The environment itself reinforces this separation. Deepwood Vale is visually distinct, with a calmer, almost serene atmosphere that contrasts with the harshness of the surrounding reach. There's water, greenery, and a sense of stillness that feels out of place, given how close it is to the more active regions. It doesn't feel abandoned, but it doesn't feel connected either. It exists in kind of an in-between state, where life is present but contained, cut off from the outside world by both geography and design. And that containment is what makes it feel truly hidden, not because it's invisible, but because it's inaccessible in any natural sense. You don't just wander into Deepwood Vale, you have to be led there, intentionally or not, through a structure that acts as both barrier and a gateway. This layered design is what sets Deepwood Redoubt apart from other hidden locations. It's not just a place you find, it's a place you pass through, and in doing so, it changes your relationship with the space around you. By the time you reach the Vale, Skyrim feels distant, almost irrelevant. The usual markers of the world, roads, cities, quests, fade away, replaced by something quieter, more self-contained. And that shift creates a kind of disorientation, a sense that you've stepped outside the normal boundaries of the game. It's subtle but effective, because it doesn't rely on spectacle or scale. It relies on contrast, on the idea that a place can feel hidden not because it's small or hard to see, but because it's separated in a way that most locations aren't. Deepwood Redoubt and the Vale it conceals represents a different kind of secrecy, one built on layers, on progression, on the gradual realization that what you've found isn't just another point on the map, but a space that exists parallel to it. Craig's Lane Cavern is a location that, on the surface, feels almost impossible to classify as hidden. And yet, the more time you spend thinking about it, the more it starts to feel like one of the most deliberate concealed places in Skyrim. Not because of where it is, but because of what it's trying to be. Located just a short distance from Shaw's Stone, a settlement that itself feels overlooked and peripheral, this cavern sits in a region that players can pass through multiple times without ever feeling compelled to stop. There are no dramatic landmarks that pull your attention toward it, no major quest lines that push you in its direction early on, and nothing about its exterior that suggests it holds anything particularly unusual. It looks like another cave, another minor point on the map, the kind of place Skyrim is filled with. And that's exactly what makes it so effective, because what's hidden here isn't the location itself, it's the nature of what's inside. When you enter Craig's Lane Cavern, the expectation is familiar: bandits, animals, and maybe a small dungeon to clear, but that expectation is immediately disrupted. Instead of chaos or decay, you find structure, organization, a space that feels lived in, not just occupied. The cavern is being used as an underground fighting pit, a place where gamblers and spectators gather to watch organized brawls, where money changes hands and violence is turned into entertainment. And that shift in tone is what reframes the entire location. This isn't a hideout in the traditional sense. It's a hidden operation, a self-contained system that exists just outside of the sight of Skyrim's surface, functioning in a way that feels almost civilized despite its brutality. The people here aren't just surviving, they're participating in something. There's a sense of routine, of purpose, of roles being filled. Fighters, organisers, onlookers. It's a small ecosystem, quietly operating beneath the world above. And that's what makes it feel hidden in a deeper sense. Because the cavern isn't isolated due to geography alone. It's isolated by design. It's meant to be unseen. The fact it's so close to Shaw's Stone only reinforces that idea. This isn't a remote mountain peak or a distant ruin. It's right there, near a functioning settlement, and yet completely still, disconnected from it. The people in Shaw's Stone don't reference it. There's no indication that this kind of activity is happening just beyond their reach. It exists in parallel, close enough to be convenient, but far enough to remain unnoticed. And that proximity creates an interesting tension, because it suggests that Skyrim isn't just hiding ancient ruins or forgotten structures. It's hiding active, ongoing systems that the player can easily miss. That kind of hiddenness feels more intentional, more human. It's not the result of time or decay. It's the result of choice. Someone built this. Someone maintains it. Someone benefits from it continuing to exist without interference. The cavern itself supports this idea through its layout. It's not sprawling or complex, but it's purposeful. The central fighting area is clearly defined, with space for spectators and movement that feels controlled, rather than chaotic. There's a sense that this place has been shaped to serve a specific function, even if that function is never fully explained. You're not given a deep backstory or a larger narrative context. Instead, you're left to piece together what's happening based on what you see. And what you see is enough to understand that this isn't a random occurrence. It's something established, something ongoing. But because it's self-contained, it never expands beyond the cavern itself. It doesn't connect to larger factions or major storylines. It doesn't influence the world outside. It remains small, quiet, and contained. And that containment is what keeps it hidden. Not just from the player, but from the world. Craig's Lane Cavern also highlights a different kind of hidden space compared to the places like Blackreach or Deepwood Vale. Those locations feel removed because of their scale or geography. Craig Lane feels hidden because of its subtlety. It doesn't overwhelm you with size or spectacle. It blends in, disguising itself as something ordinary until you look closer. And even then, it doesn't fully reveal itself. There's no grand explanation, no deeper layer waiting to be uncovered. It simply exists as it is. A quiet pocket of activity that operates independently of everything else. Blackreach might be one of the most paradoxical locations in all of Skyrim, because despite being one of the largest and most visually striking areas in the entire game, it still manages to feel deeply hidden, not just in terms of access, but in how completely it is removed from the surface world. Unlike most locations that are tucked behind mountains or concealed by geography, Blackreach is hidden vertically, buried far beneath Skyrim itself, existing as a vast subterranean expanse that most players will never fully explore unless they are deliberately pushed towards it. And even then, the game never presents it as something you can simply stumble upon. You don't just find Blackreach by wandering. You have to descend into it, piece by piece, through Dwemer ruins that act less like entrances and more like barriers, each one reinforcing the idea that what lies below is not meant to be easily reached. By the time you arrive after navigating mechanical corridors, Falmer-infested tunnels, and the remnants of a long-dead civilization, the transition feels complete. You're no longer in Skyrim, at least not in any recognisable sense. What makes Blackreach so effective as an isolated place isn't just its scale, but its disconnection. It doesn't feel like an extension of the world above. It feels like a separate layer entirely, operating under its own rules, its own atmosphere, and its own sense of time. The glowing mushrooms, the artificial lighting, the massive caverns stretching endlessly in every direction. It all creates the impression of a world that has existed in isolation for so long that it no longer relates to the surface at all. And that separation is what defines its hidden nature. Because Blackreach isn't hidden in a way that invites discovery. It's hidden in a way that suggests it was never meant to be a part of the player's journey in the first place. It exists beneath everything, unseen, and largely unaffected by the events unfolding above. The Civil War doesn't reach here. The holds don't govern it. Even the sky, one of Skyrim's most defining features, is replaced by an artificial ceiling that mimics something distant and unreachable. And yet, despite that isolation, Blackreach is not empty. It's filled with life, but a kind of life that feels alien compared to the rest of the game. Falmer move through the ruins, blind and adapted to the darkness, while Dwemer automatons continue their silent routines, remnant of a system that no longer has purpose. Giant glowing flora replaces forests, and the ambient sound design creates a constant sense of unease, as if the entire space is alive in a way that doesn't fully reveal itself. This combination of activity and isolation creates a unique tension. Blackreach feels inhabited, but not in a way that welcomes you. It feels like you've entered something self-sustaining, something that doesn't need the surface world and doesn't acknowledge it. And that's what makes it feel so deeply tucked away, not just physically, but conceptually as well. It's a place that exists outside of Skyrim's awareness, even though it lies directly beneath it. The Dwemer architecture scattered throughout only deepens that feeling. Massive structures, elevators, and ruins stretch across the cavern, hinting at a time where this place was not just inhabited, but thriving. But unlike the ruins on the surface, which are often fragmented and partially reclaimed by nature, Blackreach's structures feel more intact, more preserved, as if time has moved differently here. And yet there's still no clear understanding of what it all was. The purpose of Blackreach remains vague, its full scale and function never fully explained. It's a reminder that the Dwemer, one of Skyrim's most mysterious civilizations, built things that even the game itself doesn't fully contextualize. And that lack of explanation reinforces that idea that Blackreach isn't just hidden from the player, it's hidden from understanding. Even when you're standing in it exploring its depths, you never feel like you fully grasp what it is or why it exists. And that uncertainty becomes part of its identity. The way you access Blackreach also plays a significant role in how it's perceived. There's no single obvious entrance. Instead, it's connected to multiple Dwemer ruins across Skyrim, each one offering a different path downward. This fragmented access makes it feel less like a destination and more like a network, something spread beneath the world rather than confined to a single point. It's not just hidden in one place, it's hidden everywhere, just out of reach, waiting beneath locations you might have already explored without realizing what lies below. And that idea transforms the way you think about Skyrim's geography. Skyrim is a world that constantly invites exploration. But what these places reveal is that not everything is meant to be seen. Some locations hide behind mountains, others lie buried beneath cities, and some exist so far outside the natural flow of the world that they might as well not exist at all. From the depths of Blackreach to the quiet isolation of Reachwind, from the concealed passage of Deepwood Vale to the overlooked systems beneath Riften. These places aren't just hidden because they're hard to find. They're hidden because nothing points you towards them. They exist without asking to be discovered. And that's what makes them different. Because in a game filled with quests, markers, and direction, these locations remind you that there are still parts of Skyrim that don't revolve around you as the player. Places that carry on untouched whether you find them or not. And maybe that's the most interesting part. Not that they're hidden, but that the world never needed you to see them in the first place. Skyrim is a land built on history. Not just the kind you're told through quests and dialogue, but the kind that's buried in its ruins, carved into its walls, and hidden in places most players walk straight past. Ancient cities lie beneath the surface, forgotten tombs hold the stories of long-dead kings, and entire civilizations leave behind traces that are never fully explained. Some locations don't just exist for exploration or combat. They exist to tell a story, not loudly, not directly, but through atmosphere, design, and the small details that piece together something much larger than what you see on the surface. Because in Skyrim, the world doesn't revolve around the player. It existed long before you arrived. And in some places, you can still feel that history pressing in from every direction. Buried beneath the frozen landscape not far from Winterhold lies Sarthal, a ruin that at first glance might seem just like any other Nordic tomb. Another stretch of stone corridors filled with dragger and forgotten relics. But the deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that Sarthal is not just a ruin. It is one of the most historically significant locations in all of Skyrim. A place where the foundations of human presence in the province were first established, and where one of the most important and suspicious events in the Elder Scrolls history took place. Unlike many locations that hint at lore through scattered details, Sarthal is defined by its past, with every part of it tied to a story that reaches far beyond the ruin itself. Sarthal is known as the first human settlement in Skyrim, founded by Ysgramor and his companions after their arrival from Atmora. That alone gives it weight. This is not just an old city, it is the beginning of Nordic civilization in the region. Everything that comes after, the holds, the culture, the identity of Skyrim itself, traces back in some way to this place. But Sarthal's importance isn't just in its founding, it's in what happened shortly after. The Night of Tears. According to Nordic history, the Snow Elves attacked Sarthal, slaughtering its inhabitants in a sudden and devastating assault. Ysgramor, one of the few survivors, fled back to Atmora and returned later with the 500 companions, beginning the long and brutal conflict that would eventually lead to the near extinction of the Snow Elves as a visible civilization. This event is often framed as the catalyst for one of the most defining wars in Skyrim's history, a moment that shaped the province's cultural and racial tensions for generations. But this place complicates that narrative, because as you explore the ruin, you begin to uncover something that doesn't quite align with the traditional telling of events. The Eye of Magnus, a powerful and mysterious artifact hidden deep within Sarthal, suggests that the city was not just a settlement, but a site of immense magical significance. And that raises a question that the game never fully answers. Did the Snow Elves attack Sarthal out of pure aggression, or were they trying to reclaim or protect something hidden beneath it? That ambiguity is what makes Sarthal so lore-rich. It doesn't just present history, it challenges it. The version of events told by the Nords is clear and emotionally driven, a peaceful settlement destroyed by a hostile force. But the presence of the Eye of Magnus introduces doubt. It implies that there may have been more to the story, something that was either misunderstood or deliberately omitted over time. And that idea, that history is shaped by perspective, runs through the entire location. Even the structure of Sarthal reflects this layered path. As you move through the ruin, you're not just exploring a tomb, you're moving through different periods of time. The original settlement, the aftermath of the attack, and the later use of the site as a burial ground all overlap in a way that makes the location feel less like a single place and more like a timeline carved into stone. Each section tells a different part of the story, but none of them give you the full picture on their own. The involvement of the College of Winterhold adds another layer to this as well. When you first visit Sarthal, it's as part of a scholarly excavation, a controlled attempt to study and understand the past. But even this approach also feels limited. The college recognises the importance of the site, but it doesn't fully grasp the implications of what it contains. The discovery of the Eye of Magnus quickly shifts the focus from history to immediate danger, pulling attention away from the deeper question that this tomb raises. And that shift feels intentional, because Sarthal isn't a place that gives you answers, it's a place that leaves you with uncertainty. The Draga that inhabit the ruin are another reminder of this. Like many Nordic tombs, they represent the dead clinging to what remains of their world. But in Sarthal, they feel more significant. These are not just ancient warriors, they are the remnants of the very first Nords to settle in Skyrim. Their presence ties the player directly to that origin point, turning what could have been a standard dungeon into something far more meaningful. There's also a quiet tragedy to this tomb that isn't immediately obvious. It was once a beginning, a place of hope and expansion and new life. But now it's a grave, not just for the people who died there, but for the truth of what actually happened. The story is being told, retold, and solidified into something that may not fully reflect reality. And Saarthal, buried and forgotten for so long, becomes a symbol of that loss. In many ways, it represents how Skyrim handles its own history, not as something fixed and certain, but as something shaped by those who survive it. What makes Saarthal stand out among Skyrim's many ruins is not just its age or its connection to major events, but the way it encourages you to question what you're being told. It doesn't rely on spectacle or scale to convey its importance. Instead, it builds its significance through implication, through the gaps in its story, and that's what makes it one of the most lore-rich places in the entire game. Because it's not just about what happened there, it's about what we think happened, and how easily that understanding can be incomplete. Saarthal doesn't just show you the past, it reminds you that the past, especially in a world like Skyrim, is never as simple as it seems. Few places in Skyrim feel as heavy with history as Labyrinthian. Unlike many ruins that hint at the past through scattered details or isolated events, Labyrinthian feels like a location where multiple eras of Skyrim's history have collapsed in on themselves. It is not just ancient, it is layered, almost suffocatingly so, with each corridor and chamber representing a different moment in time. Nordic legacy, dragon cult influence, and the rise and fall of the College of Winterhold all intersect here, turning Labyrinthian into something far greater than a dungeon. It becomes a convergence point, a place where Skyrim's past refuses to stay buried. Long before it became associated with mages and magical disasters, Labyrinthian was known as Bromjanar, a significant city during the time of the dragon cult. This alone places it among the most important locations in ancient Skyrim. The dragon priests were not just powerful figures, they were central to the structure of Nordic society at the time, ruling through both religious authority and fear. Bromjanar, as one of their strongholds, would have been a place of immense influence, deeply tied to the worship of dragons and the systems that upheld their dominance. But like many remnants of that era, Labyrinthian does not present this history in a clear or complete way. Instead, it lingers in fragments, in the architecture, in the presence of dragon priest masks, and most notably, in the hidden Bromjanar sanctuary. This secret area, accessible only through the collection of all dragon priest masks, feels almost mythological in its design. It exists outside of normal gameplay flow, disconnected from any quest, and yet it holds one of the most powerful artifacts tied to the dragon cult. The fact that such an important piece of lore is hidden away, requiring extensive exploration and dedication to uncover, reinforces the idea that Labyrinthian's history is not meant to be easily understood. And that's just one layer. Centuries later, Labyrinthian becomes tied to the College of Winterhold through one of the most infamous events in its history, the failed expedition of Archmage Savos Aran and his fellow apprentices. This is where the ruin shifts from ancient history to something more personal, more immediate. As you progress through Labyrinthian during the college questline, you witness echoes of that expedition, not through direct interaction, but through spectral memories that replay the group's final moments. These scenes are some of the most effective pieces of environmental storytelling in Skyrim. They don't just tell you what happened, they show you the gradual breakdown of trust, the desperation, and ultimately the betrayal that defined the expedition. Savos, who would later become Archmage, survives by sacrificing his fellow students, sealing them away to contain a powerful entity known as Markarth. It's a decision that ensured his survival and, by extension, his rise to power. But it also casts a long shadow over his character. What makes this particularly compelling is how it reframes the College of Winterhold itself. The institution presents itself as a place of learning and control, a refuge for those who study magic. But Labyrinthian also reveals a darker side. one where ambition and fear and the pursuit of knowledge can lead to irreversible consequences. It suggests that the college's authority is not as stable or as moral as it might appear, adding another layer of complexity to its role in Skyrim. Then there's Markarth. As one of the dragon priests, Markarth represents the lingering power of the dragon cult, a direct link between Skyrim's ancient past and its present. His presence within Labyrinthian ties the two major layers of the ruin together, the era of the dragon priests and the more recent history of the college. He is both a relic and a threat, something that should have remained buried but continues to influence events long after his time has passed. This blending of timelines is what makes Labyrinthian feel so unique. Most locations in Skyrim are rooted in a single identity: a Nordic tomb, a Dwemer ruin, a bandit camp. Labyrinthian refuses that simplicity. It is all of those things at once, shifting between identities as you move through it. One moment you're navigating ancient burial chambers, the next you're witnessing the aftermath of a magical catastrophe. The environment never lets you settle into a single interpretation of what the place is. Even the name Labyrinthian feels intentional as well. It's not just a physical maze, though it certainly functions as one. It's a narrative maze as well, a place where history loops back on itself, where answers lead to more questions, and where understanding the full story requires piecing together fragments from entirely different time periods. There's no single clear explanation for everything that has happened here. Instead, you're left to navigate the complexity on your own. There's also a sense of isolation that amplifies all of this. Labyrinthian is not a place people casually visit. It sits in the mountains, distant and imposing, separated from the rest of Skyrim both geographically and thematically. When you enter it, you're stepping into something self-contained, a pocket of history that has remained largely untouched. That isolation allows its stories to linger, undisturbed, giving the entire location a kind of eerie permanence. And in the end, what makes Labyrinthian one of the most lore-rich places in Skyrim is not just the amount of history it contains, but the way that history is presented. It's not organised or easily digestible. It's fragmented, overlapping, and often contradictory. It forces you to engage with it, to question it, to accept that you may never fully understand everything it holds. It is a place where power was once centralised, where knowledge led to betrayal, and where the past continues to shape the present in ways that are never fully resolved. Labyrinthian doesn't just tell a story, it buries it, and leaves you to find your way through it. Hidden deep within the mountains of the Reach, carved directly into the stone and concealed behind layers of secrecy, Skyhaven Temple stands as one of the most historically dense and quietly significant locations in all of Skyrim. Unlike ruins that tell fragmented stories or isolated events, Skyhaven Temple feels deliberate, constructed with purpose, preserved with intention, and tied directly to one of the most important ongoing conflicts in the Elder Scrolls universe: the war between dragons and those sworn to hunt them. It is not just a relic of the past, it is a continuation of it. Skyhaven Temple was built by the Blades, an ancient order dedicated to serving the Dragonborn and, more importantly, to combating the threat of dragons. But by the time you discover it, the Blades are nearly extinct, hunted down and dismantled by the Thalmor following the events of the Great War. That context alone gives the temple a sense of weight. This is not just headquarters. It is the last remnant of a once powerful organisation, a place that has outlived the people it was built to serve. And yet, despite its emptiness, it doesn't feel abandoned. It feels like it's waiting. The journey to Skyhaven Temple reinforces this idea. You don't just stumble upon it. You have to earn your way in. Hidden behind Karthspire, guarded by Forsworn, and sealed with mechanisms that require the blood of a Dragonborn, the temple is intentionally inaccessible. This isn't a place meant to be found by chance. It is designed to remain hidden until the right person arrives. And that design speaks volumes about the Blades themselves. They weren't just warriors. They were strategists, planners, individuals who understood the importance of secrecy and legacy. Once inside, the temple reveals its true significance through the Alduin's Wall, a massive carved relief that depicts the history of dragons, the rise of Alduin, and the eventual defeat brought about by a Dragonborn. This is one of the clearest examples in Skyrim of history being recorded with purpose. Unlike the fragmented stories of Sarthal or the layered confusion of Labyrinthian, Alduin's Wall presents a narrative that is structured, intentional, and preserved across generations. But even here, there's an underlying complexity, because Alduin's Wall is not just a historical record, it's an interpretation. It shows events from the perspective of the Blades, emphasising the role of the Dragonborn as a hero figure, a necessary force in ending Alduin's reign. It simplifies a conflict that elsewhere in Skyrim is presented with more ambiguity. Dragons are not purely mindless destroyers. Alduin is not just a force of chaos. He is tied to prophecy, to cycles of destruction and rebirth. And yet the Wall presents a more straightforward version of events. That contrast makes Skyhaven Temple feel less like a neutral archive and more like a curated legacy. The Blades didn't just record history, they shaped how it would be remembered. There's also a strong sense of continuity within the temple. Unlike many ancient locations that feel disconnected from the present, Skyhaven Temple directly ties into the Dragonborn's journey. It doesn't just tell you what happened, it informs what you need to do next. The past is not separate from the present here, it actively guides it. The knowledge preserved within the temple becomes a tool, something that pushes the story forward, rather than simply existing as background detail. And that makes it feel alive in a way few lore-heavy locations do. At the same time, the temple carries a quiet sense of loss. The Blades as an organisation are no longer what they once were. Delphine and Esbern represent what's left, fragments of a once unified group trying to reclaim their purpose. And Skyhaven Temple, despite its grandeur and historical importance, cannot restore what has already been lost. It provides a foundation, a reminder of what the Blades stood for, but it doesn't rebuild them. It simply gives them a place to stand again. That tension between past and present is what really defines the location. It is both a monument and a refuge, a place built to endure, now occupied by those trying to rediscover what it was meant to be. Even its architecture reinforces this idea. The temple blends seamlessly into the mountain, hidden in plain sight, designed not to dominate the landscape, but to become part of it. This reflects the philosophy of the Blades, to operate quietly, to observe, to act when necessary, but remain unseen otherwise. There's a discipline to its design, a sense that every element serves a purpose. And that purpose has not faded, even if the people who built it have. In many ways, Skyhaven Temple represents one of the clearest examples of intentional legacy in Skyrim. It is not a ruin left behind by accident. It is a place meant to be found, but only under the right circumstances. It preserves knowledge not just for remembrance, but for action. It bridges the gap between ancient history and present conflict in a way that feels direct and meaningful. And what makes it one of the most lore-rich places is not just the information it contains, but the clarity of its role within the larger narrative. It doesn't just hint at the past, it connects it to the future. It shows how history can be preserved, interpreted, and ultimately used to shape what comes next. But even with that clarity, there's still something quietly unresolved about it. Because while Skyhaven Temple tells you what the Blades believed, it leaves open the question of whether they were right. And in a world like Skyrim, where history is rarely as simple as it's presented, that uncertainty is what gives the temple its lasting weight. It is not just a place of answers, it is a place of perspective. Skyrim is a world that constantly reminds you of its scale, but its true depth doesn't come from how big it is. It comes from how much has already happened before you arrive. Places like Sarthal, Labyrinthian, and Skyhaven Temple aren't just locations you clear out and move on from. They are layers, pieces of history that was never meant to be fully understood in a single visit. Each one tells a story, but more importantly, each one leaves something out. A missing perspective, a questionable truth, a version of events that feels just a little too convenient. And that's what makes them so powerful, because the lore in Skyrim isn't handed to you cleanly. It's fragmented, biased, sometimes even contradictory. Sarthel makes you question the origins of conflict. Labyrinthian shows how history can collapse in on itself, leaving behind only echoes and consequences. Skyhaven Temple presents a carefully preserved narrative, one that feels authoritative but not necessarily complete. Together they reveal something much bigger about the world, that history in Skyrim isn't about certainty, it's about interpretation. These places don't just exist to give you answers. They exist to make you think about who those answers are coming from and why they were preserved in the first place. They turn exploration into something more than just movement through space. It becomes a process of piecing together meaning, of deciding what you believe in a world where every story has been shaped by time, conflict, and perspective. And maybe that's the most important part, because long after the quests are finished, the enemies are gone and the loot has been collected, these places do tend to stay with you, not because of what they told you, but because of what they didn't.